Visionary begins with O'Brien lying on the floor after a workplace accident, which of course creates a conflict for this situation as Federation policy responds to a hangnail with 3 ambulances, while the Cardassians who built this place regard being zapped into unconsciousness as an impromptu workplace relief period. He's also got a case of radiation poisoning thanks to the accident, so he's going to need a dose of medicine plus light duty for a few days. You might think he should just have that time off, but then you don't know Miles O'Brien. He's a workaholic. It's all they could probably do to get him to say, well, at least let me just try to walk it off. Other problems are the fact the Romulans are coming for an intelligence briefing on the Dominion. This is Season 3, after Sisko got the Defiant, but before he got the goatee. So they're supposed to get all of the info because of the cloaking device, except there's a new wrinkle. A damaged Klingon ship has shown up, and the Klingons are not friendly with the Romulans.
We're ready for your report on the Dominion.
We have arranged quarters for you. I know it's been a long trip, so perhaps you'd like to...
We are not interested in your accommodations, Commander. We are here for your intelligence briefing.
Not that the Romulans would recognize friendliness if they saw it. O'Brien, on the other hand, knows friendliness is a game of darts in a pub. Liquor and throwing sharp objects is everyone's idea of a good time. Quark is a skeptic.
No!
And I'm betting at least someone else has failed to be won over too. O'Brien tries to demonstrate proper technique to Quark.
Like this.
Missed the follow-through. Happens to the best of us, Miles. He sees himself arguing with Quark about the damage the Klingons have done to the holosuites. Then... well, his technique is unorthodox, but you can't argue with the results. He passes out, ending the teaser. This teaser has been a pretty solid exercise in storytelling. First, it starts as late as it can, but it avoids the common mistake of starting too late. We see the aftermath of O'Brien being zapped, but we don't see him being zapped. Why? Because being zapped isn't the hook. People are always getting zapped in Star Trek, after all. It sounds like it'd be drama, but you'd either have to make it so that that's the end of the teaser, which is a weak teaser, or you have him go down and then get back up again in a short period of time, which is minimal drama. By starting with him recovering and not bothering with the shock, the emphasis is then placed on where the real hook of the episode is, him seeing himself arguing with Quark. And in an instance where 0 time passes, the use of the dart indicates this, by having the entire event happen between the time it's thrown and the time that it hits. This is likewise a smart decision to quickly convey this idea that whatever is happening to him occurs instantaneously as far as the present is concerned. So O'Brien is facing an unusual, inexplicable situation, rather than being put in peril and know that he's going to be perfectly fine as soon as the commercial is over. Smart move. The teaser also contains the bit with the Klingons showing up. Now, this decision is important because Quark and O'Brien discussed the Klingons, remember. If they would have had the Klingons not show up until after the vision, it would have suggested that O'Brien had seen the future, since he had hallucinated something that he was unlikely to have been thinking could have happened. By instead doing it this way, it's entirely possible that he's just seeing things, which is where they're operating at right now. It's just a side effect of the radiation, yet that wacky old radiation. After patting the chief on the head and sending him on his way, we see the briefing is going badly. For starters, they believe Odo is a founder, whatever he might claim, and therefore would have insight into their plans. They're also quite annoyed that there isn't more information, so Sisko says he'll see if he can get the classified documents for them. I mean, they did, after all, hand over a key piece of their strategic defense technology. The least the Federation can do is cut the red tape and tell them everything. Meanwhile, the conversation which O'Brien witnessed of him and Quark happens now, from the point of view of the put-upon O'Brien rather than dart-throwing O'Brien. Quark turns to look when the chief does and comments on it, establishing 2 things. First, that things can change, because we saw originally that Quark never noticed the second O'Brien. And also the fact that Quark can see him means that this is almost certainly something physical. It's not a vision or anything like that. despite the title being called Visionary. Dax confirms that there's physical evidence for a time shift. In fact, during her explanation, one happens. Although I'm sure a lot of people zone out during the technical bits. O'Brien discovers he's suddenly in the middle of a bar fight. But O'Brien is the kind of man of the people who needs only 3 seconds to go from standing to joining in said bar fight. And the only thing that might get in the way is not having a pool cue handy. After saving his own ass, and then his own ass returning the favor, he returns and passes out. Hopefully Dax won't take that personally. He wakes up in sickbay. Seems the time shifting is bad for his health, not counting nearly getting hit over the head with a chair. In time, this could become lethal. And speaking of which, Kira swings by ready to kill somebody over the Romulans' outrageous demands, including access to all of their personal logs. Sisko shoots that down right on the spot. It's just voyeuristic. What are they going to do next? Go digging through Kira's underwear drawer? Oh, speaking of panties in a twist, in her personal interview with the Romulans, I was going to say debriefing, but I feared you thought I was making a pun on purpose. They accuse her of abandoning the Defiant when more could have been done to stop the Jem'Hadar borders, but no, she ran away. Well, as you can imagine, Kira reads them the Riot Act, the Mob Rule Charter, and the Royal Decree of Go Fuck Yourself. Finally, she just storms out.
And I suggest you avoid asking Odo those questions, or you may just find yourself on the other side of that bulkhead floating home.
That was the 16th and the best one so far, sir. Meanwhile, Bashir and O'Brien are hanging out in Quark's, because O'Brien is convinced that despite the precautions, there's still going to be a brawl. It's easy to see why. One of those precautions was Quark forgoing getting money from Klingons. So, yeah, Klingons and Romulans are in let's get ready to rumble distance and decide it's time to dance their familiar dance. So after much ass-kicking, Odo arrives to put this to an end. But now that we've resolved this, it's time for a new problem. O'Brien sees himself at work.
Miles?
Oh shit, my bad. No, it's not actually supposed to do that. Even Cardassian stations are not equipped with panels that will fatally shoot you at strange times. This isn't Cube here. In the present, he, Sisko, and Odo check it out, but the panel is fine. No booby trap. So they're going to keep an eye on it to see if anyone actually tries something. We take a dim view on playing Russian roulette with maintenance hatches. Meanwhile, to demonstrate that even if you have good storytelling, you can have no sense of scale, Dax has revealed she has industriously scanned for the problem out to a whopping 2 kilometers, where they have detected a small quantum singularity, no less. You don't even have to think in space terms to know 2 kilometers is ridiculously small. I mean, the nearest diner to my house is 1.9 kilometers away. That is so close, I'll sometimes show up for breakfast in my pajamas, slippers, and bathrobe like I was just heading to the kitchen. They smile at me despite that because I tip well, which means I'm an eccentric and not a nut. But knowing that there's a quantum singularity nearby, it's reach out the window and grab it kind of nearby, means that that's probably messing with the radiation inside of O'Brien. So we need to find a way to try to cure him.
Keep trying to pinpoint the singularity. If it is out there, we need to locate it and find a way to get rid of it.
He says that like it's a cougar that's been spotted on the outskirts of town. Oh, by the way, for today's dose of Google bad advice, the answer to the question on cougar, whether or not it's dangerous, is cougars are dangerous to humans and pose a risk to those living or recreating in rural areas. Except if you then click the actual link below it, it's part of the myths and facts section as an example of a myth. Meaning the algorithm needs some work. Or someone at Google had a loved one killed by a cougar and they're taking revenge by playing the long game. Meanwhile, we find out that because of malfunctioning replicators, the Romulans have been moved to the part of the station that gets booby-trapped. But they're going to let this play out to try to find out who's behind it and why. And more bad news. O'Brien is again pulled into the future, this time to discover his own dead body in the infirmary.
Chief! Oh, am I glad to see you.
Oh, good. I was worried your dying would get in the way of our friendship. Thanks to the autopsy, Bashir tells O'Brien what procedure to use to try to correct the condition before it kills him for good. You know, now would be a great time for those uniforms to have a place to keep a pen.
Cesium, frankolithic, mixi-alibidium, rixi-dixi-doxy-dexy-droxa.
Meanwhile, if that term has any meaning anymore, Odo has discovered that the booby trap has been placed inside of the panel. He tracked it to a replicator that has been very carefully modified by a pro in order to act as a small-scale, short-range transporter to simply beam the device into place. Odo's meticulous police work has discovered that the 3 Klingons on board actually are covert agents that report to the High Council directly. He has the 3 arrested, so they'll stop booby-trapping the station, starting fights, trashing the house suites, and peeing down the maintenance shafts. I mean, they didn't actually say that the Klingons did that, but you know how drunken Klingons are. They see a hole with a ladder heading down, immediately those flies get unzipped. O'Brien skips ahead only to discover that future him is leading an evacuation in a runabout, and the station explodes. You know, it is a really good thing that he's come down with a case of soothsayer today. I mean, this is just one messed up day to try to handle without the benefit of a premonition. When he gets back, he shares what little he knows, and they try to take precautions, but there's only so many things that you can do. I mean, really, it's like joining a suicide pact with a choose-your-own-adventure book. So O'Brien suggests that they try to induce a time shift deliberately, but on a much shorter duration than the usual 5 hours, so that he can try to discover what will happen and to avert it before it's too late. This will involve a time-jumping armband.
And remember, don't wait too long. Your body will be experiencing symptoms of severe radiation poisoning. If you don't get treatment, it will kill you.
Oh, please, like that's gonna happen. He shows up in his own bedroom while future him is sleeping, much to future him's annoyance. So he has to fill in the future version of himself about everything, including the radiation.
But if you feel bad and you're my past self, shouldn't I feel bad too? I hate temporal mechanics.
As if there weren't enough good reason to have O'Brien be the focal point, this perfectly fits with his personality. He's not going to spew a technobabble justification for this. He's going to just show contempt for how bloody stupid this time travel is in terms of everyday common sense. There's a lot of ways to hand-wave something away that's good, but I really have to salute Miles O'Brien's just giving a middle finger to the whole damn thing. Anyway, they quickly discover what happened. A Romulan ship is decloaked and is attacking. Our O'Brien collapses, so future O'Brien tells him what he needs to know. That the quantum singularity is actually the engine of a cloaked Romulan ship, which goes a long way towards explaining why there is a quantum singularity orbiting the station about 2 kilometers away from the core. Really, it's the only explanation for why that could possibly be happening. Well, our O'Brien is dying from the radiation poisoning and isn't going to make it back. So he insists that future him go back in his place, even though future him finds that to be rather suspect. But it's not like there's a whole lot of room to argue right now, and really, who hasn't wanted to be a paradox, huh? I mean, why do you think we have to keep telling people not to kill their own grandparents? After filling them in, Sisko and company confront the Romulans, having finally figured out the motivation. With insufficient good news about the Dominion and the scale of the threat that they represent, it would be better to close the wormhole for good. But they would need to destroy DS9 to make sure there were no witnesses to what they were doing. Otherwise, everyone would, of course, be very cross with them. So after they leave before they're thrown out, O'Brien and Bashir discuss a little bit about what happened, but they figure that, well, it's probably not that big of a deal. Bashir just wants to have his friend back, and O'Brien is probably too busy to waste time on it anyway, so the end. Post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to whoever picked out the dartboard, because ever since I have been obsessed with trying to find an electronics blinking light dartboard that uses steel tips and not soft ones. Where do I find one? We have a Lazarus of the Week for O'Brien, who returns from the dead 3 times thanks to temporal shenanigans. Final score for Visionary is 7 out of 10. It's a fun little romp, and the reason for its selection actually is a little interesting. This particular outing has been in the queue for a long time because I wasn't sure quite how to handle it. You see, the original requester wanted to see an above-average episode being reviewed, and I wasn't really sure how to pick one out. In the end, what I did was I asked all the senators to pitch me an idea of what they thought, and after going through the results, this seemed like the one that best fit. So, here you go. Hey, it's not easy to pull off at this point. We've covered a lot of Star Trek. But yeah, it is hard to go wrong with an O'Brien episode because, first off, Colm Meaney is such a solid actor. And also, the character is just a relatable individual. He carries this complex story effortlessly, while still leaving room in there for Odo, Kira, Quark, and Bashir to shine as well. This is a case of how, if you can tell a story in a really, really good way, the audience will accept it no matter how dubious the logic of it might be. Because the temporal aspects of this are frankly nuts. This is not an episode to watch for anything technical. Everything even remotely scientific is naked, nay, brazenly, nonsense. But the episode is engaging enough in order to make that forgivable.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Why didn't you just say so?
Well, sometimes I have to remind you just how good I am.